Well, class, one of the points to consider as far as just business in general and starting a new business on the legal terms is essentially contracts. So through this video, I'm going to talk about several points about contracts so you can better understand how they work. Okay, as I indicate here, a contract between two parties, well, contract is an agreement between two parties to perform certain activities for some type of consideration. Usually a written agreement is preferred. However, some contracts can be stated or even implied. It's also strongly recommended that the entrepreneur use an attorney in a formal written contract, right? As for me, I don't usually use an attorney because I normally know a lot of laws. And as well as there's a lot of things that are researchable, and experience is sometimes our best teacher. So I've learned a lot throughout the years, whether it be my own situation, other people's situation, or just from attorneys, or also law type of articles that I may read. So the contract should state the name of the parties involved and the scope of transactions, right? And that's what we're getting into when I talk about inclusion of contracts. Who are the parties in the contract? You should list every single party in the contract so we know who is binding of that information. A specific action each party agrees to do and for what consideration should be stated, right? So if the consideration is money, if the consideration is a certain type of thing that they will do for you, it makes sense that you're going to state that all in the contract agreement. The timing of a payment, if it will not be immediately upon agreement or acceptance, should be stated. The time that the agreed upon transaction or event will occur and any optional expiration date should also be stated. Warranties need to be spelled out, should be stated. Termination agreements, breach of contract penalties, damages, or restitution agreements should also be stated. Whether contract can be transferred should also be stated. The state laws applicable to and specified in the agreement should also be stated, right? And within contracts, there's also called a lease. So a new business uses lease contracts to secure a building or space for its operations. Um, it specifies what business owner is leasing. It describes the length of the lease, the purpose, and renewable options in the lease agreement. It states the authorized parties responsible for making improvements. And the lower lease payments are included in leases that include the responsibility for making facility improvements. It describes maintenance and other facility responsibilities. Some of these facility responsibilities include janitorial costs, landscaping, trash removal, or utilities. It identifies the party responsible for liability insurance. It specifies whether or not the owner or tenant is responsible for insurance. The tenant could be liable for landlord liability in addition to tenant liability. It stipulates the landlord's right of entry. And it also contains procedures that address other issues. It addresses the right to cancel the lease, actions taken in case of bankruptcy, problems and disagreements, whether those be arbitration agreements, mediation options, withholding rent stipulations, and subletting may be an option. Right. So I've been dealing with real estate type of transactions and leases for, I would say, maybe over 20 years. And well, I guess what I will say about it is it all depends on your state. So you have to read your state guidelines before you start creating your own lease. And there are websites out there that give you a standard format of what really works in your state. So when we talk about how laws and regulations benefit new businesses, um, laws and regulations, what I will say is that some small businesses have fewer regulations than larger businesses. And this is why a lot of people benefit from the smaller businesses. That's why a lot of people would rather just having a small business. Because small businesses have fewer regulations than a larger business. Some industries are regulated by business type regardless of size, right? A business that has employees is required to have employer identification numbers. A business with employees is required to pay federal, state, and perhaps other taxes, right? So some states and some cities may have specific regulations. So, for instance, some New York restaurants, right? There are sources for regulatory requirements. So business assistance centers sponsored by the Small Business Administration, economic development centers in various states, chambers of commerce, Americans with Disabilities Acts. And with the American with Disabilities Acts, this law pertains to a business with more than 15 employees in order to prevent discrimination in the hiring, management, or dismissal of an employee with disabilities, right? So definitely it matters how many people you have in your business, right? Businesses are required to make reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities. Businesses are required to make their facilities acceptable to individuals with disabilities. In retrospect, requirements can change, so the law must be constantly monitored. Now, hmm, let's talk a little bit about licensing. Let's talk about licensing. Every state is going to just have different ideas of how business licensing is done. So the businesses may be required to purchase a business license from its city or county in order to operate a legal establishment in the community. To obtain a business license application or other required form can be obtained from the courthouse or other designated agency. A nominal fee to purchase business license may be charged by the city or county. The business must agree to report earnings quarterly or at other designated time intervals if required. An entrepreneur should consult with an attorney if a challenging license is required for the new business, or you can possibly contact an accountant with extreme experiences. So, certain types of businesses are required to obtain specific licenses or permits. When you think about the uh, the local alcohol beverage control requires a liquor license. You have occupancy permits for renting out a building. You have federal liquor licenses. You have local business licenses, sign permits, uh, OSHA. You have You have fire safety permits, right? So there's all these different types of licenses and permits that will allow you to do business on a higher level. When we speak about copyrights, it is the legal means to protect intellectual property. It grants ownership on creative materials generated, such as books, magazines, advertising copy, music, artwork, or virtually any other creative product, whether published or unpublished. Trademarks, well, this is a claim of intellectual property that is associated with a specific business. It may be the name of the firm, a symbol that it represents, or the names of its products or services. Entrepreneurs in general are required to renew their trademarks every 10 years. And with that being said, there's also something called patents, right? So I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of patents, whether it be for an invention or from anything that is pharmaceutical related. A patent, this is a claim of intellectual property that covers a specified innovation. Patents are expensive and they last for 20 years. For entrepreneurs, an entrepreneur will file their patent application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Entrepreneurs usually obtain a competitive advantage in an industry because it prevents direct imitation of products for a certain type of time. And the thing about it is there are different types of patents. You have a utility patent. So a utility patent is basically a patent for a new process, machine, article, or manufacture or composition of matter, or any new and useful improvement to those. You have a design patent, a patent for new, original, and ornamental design associated with an article of manufacture. And you also have a plant patent. It's a patent for someone who invents or discovers or asexually produces any distinct and new variety of plant. So a patent provides a strong barrier to prevent direct imitation for the time period of the patent. Copyrights, trademarks, and patents filed in the US only apply in the United States, which is a reason why there's a lot of imitators in other countries. So what I will say here is what we'll do is we'll talk about an effective board, just developing an effective board. So when you talk about a board has a board of directors, right? So board of directors is essentially a group formed as a legal requirement for a corporation and composed of individuals outside the business who advise the business owner of certain things. And with that too, we also have a board of advisors. So the board of advisors is a group formed at the discretion of the founders, regardless of the legal form chosen, and composed of individuals outside the business who advise the founders. The experience of the board members enhance the new small businesses initiatives. They talk about the knowledge of the industrial licensing required in the location of the new small business. They speak about knowledge of regulations of the specific industry, having success in another new startup business, having financial and accounting background. Some of them have human resource experiences, and preferred boards consistently of approximately 5 individuals or less. Of course, the board is going to meet where appropriate, and a board typically meets 3 times a year. So Of course, they're all going to have different types of boards and how they use that board. So we've learned just different parts of just how certain businesses work. We've learned today uh, through this video about contracts, inclusions of contracts, roles and leases, how laws, rules, and regulations benefit new businesses, um, about examples of licenses and permits, copyrights, trademarks, patents, and a little bit about boards. So I hope you've learned something great this morning, this today. I hope you learned something great, and I hope that you can contact me anytime with any questions or concerns that you may have. Thank you.